Shenandoah Valley stretches for nearly 180 miles from Harpers Ferry in the north to Rockbridge County in the south. It's bounded on the east by the Blue Ridge Mountains and on its western side by the Alleghenies. In the early part of 1862, Stonewall Jackson remarked, "If this valley is lost, Virginia is lost." And to me, this very brief statement has always captured the essence of the Shenandoah Valley's importance during the Civil War. In the decades prior to the Civil War, the Shenandoah Valley was an economically vital region. 20% of the wheat crops produced in Virginia and 30% of the rye crops produced in Virginia were grown right here in the Shenandoah Valley. During the Civil War, the Shenandoah Valley was essentially like a magnet for Union and Confederate armies. For Confederate forces, this was a place from which they could launch invasions into the north. It was a place from which they could threaten the capital at Washington, D.C. And also, the Shenandoah Valley provided an opportunity to be used as a strategic diversionary theater of war, as it was used during Stonewall Jackson's 1862 Valley Campaign and again in the summer of 1864 with Jubal Early's Valley Campaign. For Union forces, the Shenandoah Valley was a place from which northern armies could blunt invasion into the north, a place from which Washington, D.C. could be defended, and also a place that Union armies came to try to eliminate the very rich sources of crops and supplies in the Shenandoah Valley so that it could no longer be used as a source of provender to Confederate armies operating in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Throughout the Civil War in the Shenandoah Valley, the fighting here was incessant. By one account, there were 326 different engagements fought in the Shenandoah Valley. So on average, one every 4 days, there is something happening somewhere in the Shenandoah Valley. Some of the Civil War's most storied battles and campaigns occurred here in the Shenandoah. The battles of Jackson's 1862 Valley Campaign, which helped secure Richmond's defense at that point in the war. The Second Battle of Winchester, fought in mid-June of 1863, which thrust open the gates of Confederate invasion into Pennsylvania. And of course, the most significant of all battles here fought in the Shenandoah Valley, Cedar Creek, fought on October 19, 1864. This was the engagement that finally wrested the Shenandoah Valley from a once firm Confederate grip and also helped secure President Abraham Lincoln's bid for re-election in November. But it's important to remember that what happened here in the Shenandoah Valley did not occur in some far-off hinterland. Caught in the midst of all of this were the Shenandoah Valley's civilians. Now, while the majority of people living in the Shenandoah Valley were pro-Confederate sympathizers, about 10 to 15% of the valley's white population were pro-Unionists. About a quarter of the valley's population were free black and enslaved. Throughout the conflict, these people had to deal with the harsh realities of war. There was an aggregate effect of armies marching every single day, acres of woods being depleted by armies using them to build huts and firewood. And the Shenandoah Valley civilians, they were caught in all of the middle of this. By the spring of 1865, when the Civil War's guns fell silent, the Shenandoah Valley really was just a mere shadow of its former self. When he returned home to the Shenandoah Valley, Confederate cavalryman John Opie, who was a native of Clark County, Virginia, wrote, "This valley, which once blossomed as a flower garden, was now one great scene of desolation and ruin."